Welcome to this video entitled Comma-Separated Values in Files. This video goes with Chapter 10 in our book, An Introduction to STEM Programming with Python 3. I'm James Reneau Ph.D., and I'll be taking you through this video presentation on how to read and write CSV files. In this video, we're going to cover the CSV module, which actually does the reading and writing. We're going to talk about a special argument that you need to include in the file open statement so that it opens the file correctly for the CSV module. We're going to talk about the CSV writer object, which actually does the writing to a CSV file, and then we'll talk about the CSV reader, which will read a stream of CSV values or comma-separated values from a file. The reason we really care about CSV values is that they're often used in data interchange between one system and another. They can be imported into Excel or exported from Excel. So to move the data from your Python program into another program and then back to your Python program, the CSV format is just one of those plain text formats where a value, comma, value across multiple lines. And we'll see that as we go through this. The first thing we need to do to use the CSV is to do an import CSV at the beginning of our Python program, like we've imported other modules. This loads the comma-separated value module. The CSV module has two main things it does. One is the reader object, and one is the writer object that creates just exactly what they sound like, a reader and a writer. And when we're using our open statement, when we're using the open statement to either read or write a text file for CSV or append, be sure that you put new line equals quote quote in the open statement after your file mode of R or W or A. This tells Python that the CSV reader and writer are going to manage the end of line character and for Python not to do it. It's just because of the way the CSV module was written, and your files will look funny and not import well if you forget to leave that one little bit out of the open statement. You'll see that in our example coming up. So here in this example, I'm writing 4 random numbers to each row, and you can see the output file looks like this with 4 random numbers separated by commas going on to the next 4 random numbers separated by a comma. And let's look at the code and go through it line by line of what we're doing here. On line 1, I import the CSV module. Line 2, I import the random module because I'm working with random numbers. On line 3, I open up the text file, the pic4.csv text file. I open it for writing, and I have the new line equal quote quote. And I've named the file stream. I could have named it F, I could have named it anything I want, but it's a stream, so I just named it stream in this example. On line 4, I create a writer object that lets me write to the stream. And you can see I say csv.writer stream. If I'd named my file something else, I would have said csv.writer something else. And I named my writer because, well, that's a nice name, but I could have named anything I want. That's just another variable. So on line 4, I create the writer that's actually going to be doing the writing. So on line 5, I say for n in range of 100, I want to repeat 100 times, which I want to write 100 lines of random numbers out. So that's what that's for. I then create a list called drawing. Take a look at what I'm doing on 6, 7, and 8. This is kind of a review right out of the random chapter where I create an empty list and I append 4 random numbers between 0 and 9. Drawing.append random rand range 10, 0 through 9. So on lines 6, 7, and 8, I create a list with 4 random numbers between 0 and 9. And on line 9, I say writer, right row, and I give it a list. Now, you can give it a list with strings, with numbers, with strings with commas, with quotation marks, and it will handle it all beautifully and create a CSV file that Excel will just import right in. And you can see that that's all indented in the suite of the repeat for 100 in the range of 100. So it's going to do lines 6, 7, 8, and 9 100 times, writing out the file that we see print line 10. We print the done message you see down at the bottom. And when we're done with the suite in the context, in the program context in the width, we see that it ends and then closes the file, and the file then is there. So that's a lot of detail going through line by line through the program, but I wanted to make sure that we understood every single statement in this one. In the first slide, or in the first slide, we talked about the CSV module. I said there was a reader. Guess what? It works just like the writer, except it does the exact opposite. It will read one line at a time from a file. It will strip off the end of line character, and it will convert whatever it gets with the comma separated values into a list so that you've got a nice, pretty list to work with. Now, one thing about the reader is even when you're reading in a list of numbers, 1, 2, 3, with commas, it's going to give you a list of strings. It's always going to return a list of strings. So if you need to use the numbers as a number, you need to be sure to cast them into the proper kind of number. So let's see an example of that. Okay, so this sample program is going to read the pick 4 list that we created in the previous sample program, and it's going to return to us the count of the numbers. How many times does each number appear in the list? So read this file in and count how many times each number appears in this file. So the first value in the list would be the number of zeros. The next value would be the number of ones. The next value would be the number of twos. Now, based upon the law of large numbers, because we're writing 4 values out of 100, there are 400 numbers, random, 0 through 9. Each number should be approximately 40, and we can see that that's the case. And if you run your program, you type these programs in and you run, your sample data will be different, your random generated data will be different, and your numbers here will be somewhat different, but they'll be darn close. So let's go line by line through the program above. 1, we import our CSV method, a module. On line 2, we do our with open, creating our context manager that opens up the pick CSV4 file for reading. You see the quote R, and then you see I say new line equal quote quote, and I also named the file stream, named anything. On line 3, I create a reader. I create me a reader, and the reader is just a CSV reader for the file name or the file variable, whatever that is. So I create a reader. On line 4, I'm creating a list of 10 zeros, kind of initializing a list so that I can use that list to keep the total of counts. So this is like creating a total variable and setting it equal to 0 at the beginning of the program and accumulating into. But this is a list that I'm going to accumulate into each of the values based upon the numbers that it reads in. On line 5, I say for drawing in reader. Now, this works just like the for statement did when we were reading a file to read all of a file in. So for drawing in reader is going to read one line and it's going to call it drawing. It's reading it from the reader, not the stream. It's reading it from the reader, which reads from the stream, but it's reading it from the reader from the reader. So from drawing in reader, and the drawing is a list of strings. Drawing is a list of strings. So the first time it would be the string 1, 4, 4, and 9. The second time it would be 5, 0, 1, and 8. Remember, those are a list of strings. So I'm going to go and on line 6, I'm going to loop through however many numbers there are. If there are 3 or 12 or 19, but they're all 4 because that's the way our file is created. So we're going to loop for each element in drawing. So element is the first number on the first line, and then it's the second number on the second line, and the third number and the fourth number, and then we go out to line 5, read the next line, do the next. So we do each of the 4 values. On line 7, I change each of the strings, because remember, I said that the reader returns a list of strings. So I have to convert each of the strings to a number. So I convert each of the strings back to its original number. I then say count sub I equals count sub I plus 1. So if there's a 1, it adds it to element 1. If it's a 0, it adds 1 to element 0. So you can see that that's going to accumulate the total for each number, the count for each number. And then at the very end, I print out the count. And on line 10, if there was a line 10, we would have indented all the way out in the context manager. The width would have closed the file, but the file closed at the end of the program. So there's an example of reading a list of numbers from a file. This presentation is copyright 2020 by James Reneau Ph.D. You can contact me at jreneau@shawnee.edu if you have any questions at all. This work is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share Alike 4.0 International License, and I wish you a fabulous day.